Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Welcome to our visual journey into the literal engine of human life. We're talking about a microscopic marvel that beats in your chest, fires in your brain, and, quite frankly, gives you the energy to just exist. We're going to rely heavily on simple, interactive visuals to break down these complex biological wonders, so definitely keep your eyes on the screen as we unpack the fascinating world of the mitochondria. Seriously, it sounds like pure science fiction, doesn't it? What if the energy powering your heartbeat right now came from an ancient microscopic invader? To truly wrap our heads around the mitochondria, we actually have to stop thinking of it as just another built-in component of human biology. Instead, we need to reframe it as an ancient alien parasite that somehow managed to become our absolute greatest cellular ally. And we mean parasite literally. According to research from the University of Virginia that we're looking at, these organelles were originally energy parasites, little invaders. The endosymbiotic theory tells us that way before they learned to produce and share energy with us, they actually invaded larger host cells just to steal an energy molecule called ATP. It's absolutely wild to visualize. I mean, think about it, a hostile microscopic takeover that eventually transformed into the ultimate biological partnership. So, how did we get here? Well, this evolutionary leap builds across a pretty fascinating timeline. You have to go way back, 2 billion years ago, for that initial microscopic leap to occur. Then, fast forward to the 19th century. In 1882, the scientist Walter Fleming first observed these structures and called them phyla, which literally just means threads. It actually wasn't until 1897 that Carl Benda officially coined the term mitochondria, pulling from the Greek words for thread and granule. And today, well, today we just know them as the indispensable powerhouses of complex life. Now, to put their scale and their importance into perspective, we're talking about a structure measuring a mere 0.5 to 1.5 micrometers wide. Tiny, right? Yet, it produces an astonishing 90% of our body's vital energy. The best way to simplify this whole concept is to just think of it as the cell's car battery. Because just like a vehicle, if this microscopic battery dies, the entire machine completely grinds to a halt.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how this core biological function bridges languages. In Arabic, it's al-tanafus, and in English, it's respiration. But whether you call it al-tanafus or respiration, this is the universal language of cellular life. It's the foundational process of extracting massive amounts of stored energy from the food we eat.
So, how does this respiration actually happen? Well, it systematically unfolds in 4 distinct steps. First up, glycolysis breaks down glucose sugars. Second, pyruvate oxidation steps in to prepare that broken down fuel. Third, the citric acid cycle, you might know it as the Krebs cycle, spins into action right inside the mitochondria, releasing carbon dioxide. And finally, the real magic happens in the electron transport chain. This is where oxygen is consumed and those vital ATP energy molecules are finally charged up and released to power your entire body. Moving on to Section 1, Anatomy and Transport Proteins, the armor and weapons. You can really see the stark difference in their defensive armor here. The outer membrane is highly permeable. It actually uses something called the Tom complex, which features these 22 angstrom wide pores just to pull in proteins. But the inner membrane, oh, it is an absolute fortress. Highly impermeable, packed with a special lipid called cardiolipin, and it houses those massive respiratory chains like complex I and ATP synthase, where the actual energy production happens. It is a brilliantly designed, restricted access power plant.
Which brings us to Section 2, the botanical rival, mitochondria versus chloroplasts.
And this brilliantly illustrates the beautiful cyclical symmetry between these powerhouses. Think about it. Mitochondria consume glucose and oxygen to give us energy, leaving behind carbon dioxide and water as waste. Chloroplasts in plants, they do the exact opposite. They take in sunlight, plus our waste products of carbon dioxide and water, to create glucose and oxygen. It is literally the perfect recycling loop of nature. One's trash is completely the other's treasure. But despite being total opposites in their chemical inputs, they share some incredible superpowers. Both are enclosed by a double membrane. Both replicate completely on their own, dividing kind of like bacteria. And most astonishingly, both contain their own independent DNA, totally separate from the nucleus of the host cell. Guys, this is the smoking gun evidence for the endosymbiotic theory. It proves that both of these organelles most likely began their existence as independent, free-roaming bacteria millions of years ago. Let's transition to Section 3, the kryptonite, genetic malfunctions and disease.
Now, before we look at what happens when this complex machinery breaks down, we need to understand a really unique rule of mitochondrial genetics. Your mitochondrial DNA is inherited exclusively from your mother. When fertilization occurs, the sperm only injects its nucleus into the egg. That means the mitochondria and the DNA inside them are a direct, unbroken biological copy handed down from your mother and her mother before her.
Looking at the numbers, 1 in 5,000, that's the prevalence of people suffering from a genetic mitochondrial disease. And because these organelles literally power everything, when their DNA carries a mutation, that resulting energy depletion can have profound systemic impacts on the human body.
A prime, very grounding example of this is Leigh syndrome. It's a severe progressive neurodegenerative disorder. It essentially happens when the cellular battery simply cannot meet the body's energy demands. What often happens is a patient might be relatively stable until a viral infection or extreme metabolic stress forces their body into a state of decompensation. That's a sudden inability to cope with energy demands, which unfortunately leads to a rapid loss of previously acquired developmental skills. So the crucial point is how this energy failure actually manifests physically. When breaking down the most common symptoms of Leigh syndrome, you can see the devastating effects on the brainstem and the nervous system. 80% of patients face respiratory issues, 75% struggle with swallowing or dysphagia, and 65% experience low muscle tone, also known as hypotonia. You've also got dystonia at 50% and ataxia at 40%. When the power goes out at the cellular level, the most energy-hungry systems, our muscles, our nerves, our breathing, are naturally the very first things to shut down.
But let's bring this back to what you can control. The amazing news we found in our sources is that your daily lifestyle choices directly manipulate these microscopic organelles. To protect your powerhouse, you need to maintain a healthy diet full of fresh foods, lean proteins, and green vegetables. You definitely want to avoid smoking, which causes severe oxidative stress. And here is absolutely the best part. Engaging in regular physical exercise doesn't just use up energy. It physically increases the size and density of the mitochondrial network inside your cells. You are literally building bigger batteries for yourself.
Which brings us to our final thought. Every single time your heart beats, every time you take a breath, you are relying on the ancient, independent DNA of a microscopic former parasite that lives by the thousands inside your cells. The power is quite literally inside you. So, knowing all of this, how will you fuel your powerhouse today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.